wood that we got, if it says that's, pre-money pit discovery, then yeah, then you pretty much have to say, geez, very good chance part of the flood tunnel. If that data comes back old, we're right back at this thing.
Rick Lagina may have just done what nobody thought was possible: bring the legendary Oak Island treasure hunt to an end. For decades, Rick and his team have spent millions of dollars, countless hours, and years drilling into one of the world's most mysterious islands. But now, a staggering $180 million deal has suddenly placed everything in question. What could possibly be valuable enough to make Rick walk away after all these years? What was discovered beneath Oak Island? And what exactly happened behind closed doors that could bring the greatest treasure hunt in history to its final chapter? Because there may be one crucial detail about this $180 million deal that changes the entire story. Before we uncover what happened, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because you won't want to miss what comes next. Stay with us, because by the end of this video, you'll understand what the $180 million deal could mean, and why Rick Lagina's next move may be the most shocking chapter in the entire Oak Island story. Oak Island has never been just another piece of land, sitting off the southern coast of Nova Scotia. Its rugged shoreline, dense spruce forests, and strange, uneven ground have been surrounded by mystery for centuries. Long before Rick Lagina ever began searching there, old maps dating back to 1795 were already pointing towards strange underground shafts, possible flood tunnels, and structures that seemed impossible to explain. Since the late 1700s, historians have recorded at least 26 serious attempts to excavate the island. Some consumed enormous amounts of money, others ended in tragedy. Yet again and again, the result was the same. Treasure hunters either walked away empty-handed or watched their tunnels disappear beneath rushing water. Then, years later, everything appeared to change. In the early 2000s, Rick Lagina and his team brought in advanced underground surveying technology designed to detect structures nearly 200 feet below the surface. During one freezing autumn evening, just before winter completely covered the island, their equipment picked up something unusual: a disturbance beneath the ground. The signal was faint at first, almost like a heartbeat, buried beneath layers of stone and soil. But when the team analyzed the readings, they noticed something that made the discovery far more intriguing. The data suggested a solid underground structure, approximately 30 meters long, surrounded by several empty spaces. The pattern appeared remarkably similar to what you might expect from a deliberately constructed underground chamber. Rick stood beside the marked location as the cold wind swept across the island. He had seen thousands of readings over the years, but this one felt different. The signal was stable, consistent, and strangely precise. Some members of the team believed the anomaly could simply be a natural geological formation. But Rick wasn't convinced. To him, the pattern looked intentional. For the first time, it seemed as though Oak Island might finally be revealing something. The team began drilling carefully into the suspected location. At approximately 92 feet below the surface, the drill brought up fragments of oak timber. Radiocarbon testing reportedly placed the wood somewhere around the 1500s, centuries before Oak Island was officially settled. Then, at roughly 108 feet, another discovery appeared. Tiny traces of gold were found embedded inside a layer of clay. They weren't scattered randomly. Instead, the traces appeared concentrated in narrow bands, suggesting that the material might once have been transported or deliberately contained. For Rick, the implications were enormous. Could this finally be physical evidence that the legendary treasure stories weren't completely fictional, the location was quickly given a private designation, Sector X7. Access became extremely restricted. Only 7 members of the team were reportedly allowed near the site, while information about the discovery remained tightly controlled until the evidence could be independently verified. And the drilling continued. Over the following 4 months, the team reportedly recovered additional material, including metal fragments with what appeared to be an 18-karat gold coating, pieces resembling parchment fibers, and part of what looked like a seal ring. The ring carried a cross-shaped pattern that some associated with the Knights Templar. Suddenly, the conversation surrounding Sector X7 changed. This was no longer simply about an unexplained underground anomaly. The potential value of the chamber was beginning to enter a completely different category. Experts estimated that, if the underground vault was intact, its contents could potentially be worth more than $180 million. And that figure didn't even account for the historical importance of whatever might be inside. That's when negotiations allegedly began. Rick reportedly started contacting preservation organizations, private museums, and wealthy custodians who could potentially secure the discovery without allowing it to disappear into private hands. The process wasn't quick. Nearly 11 months of evaluations, negotiations, and confidential documentation followed. Eventually, according to the story, Rick secured the agreement. A deal worth $180 million was reportedly placed behind strict confidentiality agreements. The treasure had finally been found, and after decades of searching, the Oak Island hunt appeared to be over. But then something unexpected happened. As the drilling equipment went quiet and the ground around Sector X7 settled, another disturbance began emerging beneath the island. This signal was stronger, more defined, and almost as if Oak Island itself had reacted to what the team had uncovered. The celebration didn't last long. Soon after Sector X7 was closed and sealed under the reported $180 million agreement, strange problems began appearing across the operation. Underground passages that had previously been stable began filling with water again. Equipment malfunctioned at critical moments, and sudden storms repeatedly disrupted excavation plans. To the exhausted crew, it almost felt as if the island itself was pushing back, as though something deeper underground was still being protected. And that was the beginning of what the team would later think of as the island fighting back. After Rick allegedly finalized the confidential preservation agreement for the first chamber, everyone expected the most difficult part of the operation to be finished. They were wrong. Oak Island appeared to have another secret waiting below. The next target was designated Sector D9, located only about 50 meters from the chamber Rick's team had already investigated. Ground-penetrating radar scans conducted in late spring reportedly revealed 3 separate underground cavities. They appeared to sit between approximately 85 and 120 feet beneath the surface, with formations that seemed to connect through possible man-made shafts. The team began excavating in early June. Everything was kept quiet. The weather was calm. The operation was highly controlled, and nobody outside the core group was supposed to know exactly what they were looking for. But almost immediately, something felt wrong. The soil wasn't behaving normally. Instead of breaking apart naturally, it seemed unusually compact and resistant, almost as though it had been deliberately packed into place. Then the excavators encountered timber wedges. Beneath them was dense clay. Layer after layer appeared to be blocking the team's path, and the deeper they tried to go, the clearer it became that whatever had been constructed beneath Sector D9 had not been designed to make discovery easy. The team had already uncovered one extraordinary chamber. Now they were facing another underground structure, and this time, Oak Island seemed determined to keep its secret buried. When the drilling equipment finally reached a depth of 94 feet, something completely unexpected happened. The ground didn't simply collapse inward. Instead, the surface suddenly pushed upward, forcing a mixture of slurry, soil, and broken timber fragments toward the surface. The recovered wood was sent away for analysis, and the results immediately caught the team's attention. The timber appeared to date from roughly the same period as the wood discovered in Sector X7, somewhere between the 15th and 16th centuries. That raised a disturbing possibility. The team might not have been dealing with a single hidden vault at all. There could be an entire underground system beneath Oak Island, multiple tunnels, multiple chambers, and perhaps a much larger structure connecting them all. By July, the team decided to attempt a deeper excavation. That was when the situation became even more difficult. A violent storm suddenly developed despite what had been relatively clear conditions. Winds approaching 90 kilometers per hour tore across the site, sending equipment flying and filling several boreholes with water. When the crew returned days later, another problem was waiting for them. The main excavator suddenly stopped working. Its hydraulic system had completely seized, even though technicians couldn't identify a clear mechanical reason. And that wasn't an isolated incident. Over the following 3 weeks, more than 11 pieces of machinery reportedly suffered failures. What made the situation even stranger was that later inspections couldn't reproduce many of the problems. The deeper the team went, the more unusual the discoveries became. At approximately 112 feet, divers recovered a badly rusted hand tool wrapped in remarkably preserved leather. Although the object had suffered extensive corrosion, its blade design appeared similar to European tools, dating from roughly 1490 to 1520. That was significant, because the tool appeared to predate European colonization of the New World. And then came something even more important. Directly beneath the artifact, the team uncovered a series of wooden planks. They weren't scattered randomly. They appeared to form the roof or side of an underground passage. The tunnel itself seemed deliberately angled toward the center of the island. It didn't look like something created by accident. It looked planned, engineered, built with a purpose. The discovery began affecting the crew psychologically as well. Some of the veteran miners who had spent years working underground started expressing serious concern. A few refused to continue deeper. Others claimed they could hear strange sounds coming from below. They described a repetitive knocking pattern, 3 knocks, a pause, then 3 more. Of course, the sounds could have been caused by shifting rock, water pressure, or the movement of the underground structure. But on Oak Island, even ordinary explanations seemed to raise extraordinary questions. The team's data specialists then examined the latest sonar readings. The results suggested that the tunnel system might extend much farther than anyone had anticipated, possibly more than 300 meters. Even more intriguing, the readings appeared to show chambers positioned at regular intervals, almost like markers placed along an underground route. It was as though whoever constructed the system had deliberately designed a path leading deeper into the island. But the next chambers remained inaccessible. Thick layers of compact sediment blocked the passages, and attempting to force through them could potentially trigger another collapse. Rick Lagina was now facing a difficult decision. He had already secured the reported $180 million agreement intended to protect and conceal the contents of the first discovery. But these newly uncovered tunnels suggested something far bigger. The first chamber might not have been the final destination. It could have been only one part of a much larger underground complex, and whatever waited farther below could potentially be more valuable than the original treasure, not necessarily in gold, but in knowledge, artifacts, or historical evidence. Then, on August 17th, everything changed again. Part of the D9 tunnel suddenly collapsed. 3 members of a survey crew were trapped underground. Fortunately, they managed to escape with only minor injuries. But their account of what happened immediately raised new questions. According to the crew, the wall hadn't simply collapsed under its own weight. It appeared to have broken inward, almost as though something behind the wall had shifted first. Something inside the hidden chamber may have moved. The incident forced the team to suspend heavy excavation. Instead of sending more machinery underground, they brought in specialists trained to analyze artifacts and ancient materials. And what those specialists discovered next would completely change the direction of the investigation. From the debris surrounding the collapsed wall, the team recovered an object that initially left the scientists struggling for an explanation. It was a piece of evidence that appeared impossible to ignore. The D9 collapse had transformed the investigation from cautious excitement into something far more serious. When the tunnel wall broke inward, it exposed a narrow cavity that appeared to have remained untouched for centuries, possibly since the late 1400s. Then, buried beneath the falling sediment, a small leather-wrapped package slid forward. Its position almost looked deliberate, as if someone had placed it there specifically to survive undisturbed until the right person eventually found it. Inside was a small metal tablet, roughly the size of a human palm. It was surprisingly heavy, despite being relatively thin. At first, its surface appeared almost blank, but when researchers directed light across the metal, faint markings suddenly became visible. Symbols emerged from the surface. Among them were cross-shaped engravings that some researchers compared to symbols appearing in historical Templar manuscripts dating from the 14th and 15th centuries. For years, scholars had believed similar symbols existed primarily within written records preserved in European collections. Now, according to the story, comparable markings had appeared more than 110 feet beneath a remote island in the North Atlantic. Radiographic testing reportedly placed the alloy around the beginning of the 16th century, broadly matching the dating of the ancient oak timbers recovered from the same underground system. The object's edges were remarkably smooth. They didn't appear naturally worn. They showed signs consistent with prolonged human handling. Whoever had placed the tablet underground may have intended it to survive for generations. But the discoveries didn't stop there. Only hours later, 2 more objects were recovered from the same cavity. The first consisted of thin fragments of what appeared to be extremely pure gold, reportedly around 22 carats. The pieces looked as though they had been cleanly separated from a much larger object. The second discovery was even more delicate, a narrow parchment container, sealed with hardened resin. Researchers spent 4 days carefully controlling the humidity around it before attempting to open the fragile container. When they finally did, they found tightly rolled parchment covered with writing. The characters appeared to include both Latin and Old French. Carbon dating reportedly placed the parchment somewhere between 1492 and 1528. Despite its age, portions of the document had survived. The researchers could make out partial diagrams, curved or arched chambers, directional markings, and a mysterious reference to the word kustos, interpreted as meaning the keepers or guardians of gold. Rick Lagina reportedly stared at the document in disbelief. For decades, he had chased stories about hidden chambers, secret vaults, and mysterious knowledge supposedly buried beneath Oak Island. Now the investigation appeared to have produced something far more tangible: physical evidence. And the implications were enormous. The treasure might not simply have been a collection of valuable objects. It could have been an intentionally assembled repository, a hidden collection created by people who understood exactly what they were protecting. For the team, the story had crossed a major line. It was no longer just folklore. It was no longer simply a theory. They now believed they were looking at evidence that someone had deliberately placed something beneath Oak Island centuries ago. And then the geological data delivered another surprise. New survey results indicated that the cavity discovered beneath D9 might not be an isolated chamber at all. The underground network appeared to continue, and somewhere beyond the newly discovered passage, there could still be another chamber waiting to be opened. Initial underground modeling suggested that at least 5 separate tunnels branched away from the main network and continued deeper beneath the island. The scale of the system was becoming difficult to comprehend. What the team was seeing looked less like a simple hiding place and more like an underground complex, comparable in complexity to ancient European catacombs. Whatever its true origin, it appeared far beyond anything that ordinary pirates, settlers, or treasure hunters would have been capable of constructing. By late September, specialists had completed new valuations of the recovered artifacts and ancient documents. The numbers were far higher than anyone had originally anticipated. When the newly examined materials were combined with the contents previously recovered from Sector X7, historical analysts reportedly pushed the confidential valuation beyond $180 million. That figure suddenly gave new meaning to the agreement Rick had already secured. The deal no longer looked like a simple financial transaction. It looked like protection, because if word of the discovery reached the wrong people, Oak Island could quickly become the target of private collectors, wealthy investors, and even government interests from around the world. But the artifacts were only the first layer of the mystery. As the team continued scanning deeper into the island, their instruments produced another astonishing result. Far below the surface, somewhere between approximately 160 and 190 feet, imaging appeared to reveal a large underground structure. At first, researchers thought they might be looking at an unusual geological formation, but the geometry didn't fit. The structure seemed to contain smooth, uniform angles that were difficult to explain through natural processes. Rick could feel the significance of what they were uncovering. The evidence already in his possession was extraordinary, yet something deeper appeared to be drawing the team forward. The deeper they looked, the greater the pressure became. Funding increased, competition intensified, and rumors began escaping the tight circle surrounding the operation. Rick realized that the team might no longer be the only group searching for whatever was buried beneath Oak Island. The race was becoming a battle against more than rock, water, and unstable tunnels. They were now racing against other people, and every hour brought them closer to a chamber that, according to the story, no one had reached in more than 2 centuries. That was where the next chapter began. A race against the darkness. After the engraved metal artifact and the sealed parchment appeared to confirm the presence of an ancient hidden complex, the world outside Rick Lagina's inner circle began to react. Secrets rarely stay buried forever. By early October, whispers about the reported $180 million agreement began circulating through private collector networks. Soon, government historians, private foundations,